Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and if you're new, welcome. Today is the much awaited winter planting video for Zone 4, Zone 5 inside your greenhouse, and we're going to put some tunnels up and stuff like that on some of these beds, and we're also going to be covering what grew well and what didn't grow so well. I got my apple from the tree and some pine needle tea I'm sipping on here. It's early morning. We wanted to come out and get all this covered and share all of this information. Now, if all that sounds interesting to you, that is pretty much all we do here on our channel, so I would encourage you to subscribe so you don't miss anything, and let's get into today's video. First, let's cover what grew best. Our kale, lettuce, onions, our perpetual spinach chard, long-standing Bloomsdale spinach that did really well, cilantro, heading collard. Our leeks did very well. All the onions do very well, but the leeks and ramps did very well for us, and the turnips, the 7-top turnips and the globe top turnips. Now, those are just the crops that we had the most success with, so those could have been our failures in part by having stagnation or not good airflow or too much moisture. It's a lot of factors, or they could have gotten cold or something, but we kept the greenhouse pretty well warm all winter. So we did have good success with a lot of crops, but there is some that did not do so well. Our pak choys and tatsoys. I mean, our tatsoi did very well. Our mustard tatsoi up until we ate it all, and then we couldn't get any more to sprout. So it doesn't like to be sprouted in the cold, but if you get it going early, it will carry into the cold season. Now, two that did not do very well for us is Swiss chard, the regular red chard. Just did not do well. The Ford Hook chard and the perpetual chard spinach, very good, very successful. The red chard just kind of wilted back and did not do anything. So that was probably our fault by having it in the wrong place. So we have some more chard. I'm going to show all these beds and talk about everything we've planted so far in the greenhouse after I cover everything you can plant. There is many crops that can be grown and experimented with, and I encourage everyone to grow and experiment with their own stuff to find out what works in your best particular location or your situation. Now, before I get into all these plants and seeds, I want to talk about some transplanting tips, because these are plants we're not planting from seed, we're transplanting. So when we're bringing plants from outside the greenhouse, we've got kales, we've got some of our heading collards here, we've got some cabbage, a couple brassica plants basically, and maybe some broccoli plants that were underdeveloped we might be able to get some leafy greens off of. So I have a bucket of ice water down here. Nobody can see that. So I have a bucket of ice water, and I've been using this ice water to basically submerge all of these crops. I'm gonna give everybody a close-up of this here. So we've got a cabbage and some kale in the ice water, and I've already found a few of the little worms that come off. There's a worm right there. So that little worm, you can see that little worm, it's a tiny little worm, but that is going to devastate our crops inside the greenhouse. So we'll use this ice water, and there's a few other things you can do, but that ice water works great. Now, there's a few different things you can do. You can use a hose and just spray the plant off before you transplant it, but we like to throw it in the bucket of ice water and shake it up with the lid on here, and then we'll be able to come by and just basically sift it or clean it up or flood it, and all of those worms or whatever bugs are on it will just flow out, because the water's so cold they just freeze up and they basically just fall off. Now, another thing you can do is use a little bit of onion water. I've got Egyptian onions growing over there, and you can take that, just grind a little bit up, and that onion smells like sulfur, and it drives all the other bugs off because they don't like that smell. So using a little bit of onion water, I've tried it, it works okay. The ice water works way better. And then again, you can take a huge bucket of them and just throw them in the fridge for a day or two, and it doesn't kill the plants as long as they got some water in there, and then all of those bugs will basically die back, and you can come shake them right off the plants. That was just a quick tip for everybody, because transplanting can be difficult and you don't want to bring any extra bugs or pests inside the greenhouse that are going to run rampant without you knowing. Now, I want to give a quick rundown list of crops that will grow in an unheated or heated greenhouse throughout the winter. Now, let's start with all the varieties of lettuces. There is a ton. Our Grand Rapids, the very curly lettuce, the very cold hardy lettuce, that does the best for us. And next, I want to highlight all the varieties of kales. I have a bunch right here. I've got red kale, I've got some of our dwarf curly kale, we've got some of our dinosaur kale, and we've even got this Siberian kale. We've got lots of kale varieties. Like, there's lots of lettuce varieties, lots of lettuce mixes. There's just so many to choose from. You just want to try and experiment and see what works best. Now, there is many chards too. You've got perpetual chard, Ford Hook chard, the white Lucilla chard, red chard. Now, everything but red chard did well for us, and regular spinaches are a very long-standing crop. They do very well, they like the cold, and they are definitely going to survive in the winter time in the greenhouse. Now, all your brassicas are going to do well. Your cabbage, your broccoli, your kohlrabi, your heading collards, bok choys, pak choys, tatsoys, they will do well if you get them in and well established, covered, and they have good ventilation in the bed. You've got rutabagas, turnips, mustard, cauliflowers, and broccoli, if I haven't already said. And don't forget about Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts are another great one. Let's move into the root crops. So turnips, I thought were a root crop, but I guess they're part of the brassica family also. So we've got beets, radishes, carrots, parsnips, onions, garlics, and leeks, and wild ramps. There's lots and lots of root crops that are easy to grow, and they do well, and they have good benefits for other crops in the greenhouse. Don't forget about tubers also. We've got potatoes, and we tried some of our Jerusalem artichokes last year. Artichokes did overwinter, but they didn't really do so well, and they're so tall that we don't want to do them in the greenhouse. So potatoes are a great one. We've got 2-month potatoes running. Like I said, I'm going to show the entire greenhouse after we cover all the crops that we can't grow. And a very important thing to not forget is your perennial herbs. You can have oregano, mint, your onions, chives, you've got lavender, thyme, rosemary. Planting leeks, onions, ramps, any type of bulbing onion, chives, they are very, very good for pest protection. And one tip I will give everybody is when we're out in the greenhouse, I will work with the onions, or I'll take one and I'll just kind of squeeze it up and make that smell permeate in that area, because it does keep all of the pests away. Along with the mint or lemon balm, we plant that at the doors or doorways where we're going to brush against it and keep the mosquitoes down, keep the rodents down, keep everything down, because we have all of those elements to basically naturally repel them. The sulfur smell of those onions is going to repel the mice, slugs, moths, flies, worms, aphids, and basically all of those pests that are going to be trying to eat your leafy greens. Another reason we plant so many leeks and onions in the winter time is because you can cut the tops of them, like our Egyptian onions, and you can come back. Our leeks, our ramps, you can cut those and you can come back and you can have multiple harvests. And leeks are a superfood, and here is why. Just 1 cup of leeks provides 54 healthy calories and about 1 gram of protein, and it is very high in vitamin K, A, E, C, and B6, while being high in flavonoids, meaning that they fight cancer and they fight diabetes. Now, one more pest protection is marigolds, but those don't really survive too well in the winter time. They need light to bloom and stuff. So I have marigolds and a huge bush that my son planted from seed that we brought in here as pest protection for the right here, right now, while we get all of our winter beds planted. So I'd really like to state that we do plant a great diversity of crops, and I'm going to show everybody that because we like to spread the risk out. So if you have one crop, you just plant your whole greenhouse with spinach, and say you get a slug infestation or you get some type of disease or a cold spell or something happens to kill that whole entire crop, then you have to start all the way over. So if we have our spinach killed and some of our lettuces, we might still have all of our kales, onions, chards, our sorrels and our collards and some of our parsley and stuff, cilantro, all the stuff that will survive if we do accidentally have a cold spell, a window blows open or a door blows open or something like that. Worst case scenario. So we're always looking out for our investments by diversifying, looking out for a catastrophic failure on one crop. Now, being just as important as crop selection is whether you're going to heat or not. And we have put an absolute ton of time and energy into building passive and free energy heating systems, putting all of that work in and putting the investments in up front to achieve a whole winter's worth of heat and many winters to come. Now, pairing geothermal with solar power, compost heating, a stove, all of our thermal mass and passive solar heating experiments, we've been able to achieve a very warm greenhouse throughout some very cold times. Now, a very warm greenhouse to me, guys, is considered above 50 degrees, and for the most part of the winter we were above 50 throughout the nights and everything. Even with negative 30 outside, the lowest temperature we saw at ground level was 42, 43 degrees, which is not going to kill any of the plants that I've mentioned that you can grow in the winter time. Now, providing heat and electricity to a greenhouse by any means necessary can be very costly. Whether it's oil, gas, electricity, you're going to be paying for some type of fuel source. Our decision to heat with all of those methods I mentioned provided us all of the extra resources as money that we're able to invest it into more systems, and it's kind of just like a snowball effect. We're able to just continually roll and not have to put any money into heating the greenhouse, while we're able to save money and invest it other ways. Now, if you're choosing to actively heat by whatever method you choose, actively heating is the way to go, because if you have good insulation, even if you don't, you can spend the money to heat, and you're just going to keep expelling all your heat through the outside and exchanging with your walls and stuff. As your air brushes around, it definitely loses heat. That's why we did a 6 to 8 inch air gap, so we have a lot less. All that dead air is not moving, so all the heat will rise up and it'll slowly fill that outside gap and exchange, and we're losing heat at a lot slower rate. We're able to melt the snow off the greenhouse within about an hour of the greenhouse inside heating up, so it takes a while for that to exchange to the outside. So that tells me that we're able to keep all of that heat and we're using that dead air for insulation. Now, if you choose a passive heating method or a passive solar solution, the growth is going to be much slower unless you have a ton of money or a ton of equipment to dig down in the ground or build a super insulated area. Now, insulation is everything in the winter, whether you're heating or not. Having the ground insulated, having your walls as insulated as possible, all of those are very important, because that is where your heat is going to be sapped from. The ground is going to be frozen outside, so it's going to be really, really cold on the edges of your greenhouse. Thinking about that, we insulated what we could, and then we keep our beds about 6 inches away from the edge of the wall and then roll tunnels up, which allows us to grow throughout the entire winter. Now, an unheated greenhouse is a good solution if you have good passive solar and insulation, like I mentioned, but you are much more susceptible to diebacks and those cold, stagnant periods where there is no sunlight or heat energy for possibly a month at a time. Now, we've got an absolute ton of stuff going on in this greenhouse, and getting all these plants, I wanted to talk about all the seeds and everything we could plant, and then I want to show everything, because all the beds here are the building blocks. We had to get the building blocks in place, and I've got tomatoes in the greenhouse still, and we're mid-October, mid to late October, and it's been 35 degrees at nighttime, frost on everything. Still got heirloom tomatoes, big fat tomatoes that are developing. We just gave all of that fish meal to them, all the fish waste, so they are really producing. We're gonna walk around and check the whole greenhouse out. Starting down at the end without the shade cloth, we're going to be doing a ton of experimenting down here, so look for tons of videos coming from our stove, compost heating, and everything. So I'm gonna be bouncing the camera around the whole greenhouse and talking about everything we got going on. We've got our Egyptian walking onions and a whole bunch of kale that we ran through our ice water, and you can see that it is alive and doing well, and the transplant went well. We kept the soil moist. The shade cloths are allowing it to kind of transplant and rejuvenate before it gets that full sun when we take the shade cloths off. So we do have some small lettuce sprouts coming up around the edge of the bed here, so around the entire bed, and all of these egg paint bricks we used on the backside to hold some extra heat from the sun. So we've actually got some sprouts coming up from our lettuce here, which is very encouraging. We've got a lot of growth coming up in all these beds. So coming down from our kale and Egyptian onion bed, we've got all of these white onions here, and you can see we just rode them in, and then we planted some more kales and heading collards and stuff in each row to get all the sprouts up. So this whole entire bed is planted. We'll jump on the other side here. So I wanted to show that we have all these bricks that we pulled out. We are going to use our egg paint and paint those up, because once it dries, it does not brush off on you, and it really does not come off unless you're really scrubbing it with water and soap. So looking a little beyond me here, we've got 2 different kinds of spinach planted out in that bed, and then right down here we've got all of this Swiss chard, and I'm going to experiment with the chard. I want to get it covered up and well established, and I have a big area of this bed here. So from this board all the way up to this perpetual chard spinach, we've got some chives down here, some parsley, and all of our green sorrel here that I put some bricks around to help encourage growth, as I pulled everything back and just basically cut it back to encourage growth also. So I do have some more seed to plant in this area, but for the most part all of this is planted all the way up to the methane barrel, and we're still working on our pond here. So let me turn this around and show this little microclimate. So taking a quick glance, we've got our wild leeks or our ramps, and we've been trying to get these well established, and they are there. So we're gonna transplant a few out and give them their own patch to let them run wild outside. Another great crop that I really didn't mention, but it is a perennial, is strawberries. We've got tons of strawberries. I don't know if you guys can see those strawberries. They're turning red on me. So those are very, very expansive. They really, really like the greenhouse. They like the shade cloth. They like the moisture. When we're watering them heavily, they produce a ton of strawberries, the ever-bearing variety. And they'll stay green pretty much all winter in the greenhouse if it stays 50 degrees or more. But they don't really produce, so we only give them a small corner and they continue expanding. They've got a whole ton of area they just keep crawling out of. They're kind of walking right out of their bed also. But this little microclimate here, we found ourselves a few little free rhubarb babies. So we're going to transplant some rhubarbs. We've got some of our St. John's wort. We've even got some nightshade plants, some pineapple tomatillos, some free kale sprouting up, some wild strawberries in the back, lots and lots of purslane. Lots of free crops to eat. We've got free dandelions coming up, so dandelion root and the leaves are edible. Everything of the dandelion is edible. So jumping from this little bed, coming over to the water tank, we've got some large heading collards that we sank in ice for a few days and pulled them in, and we're hoping to get good growth. We had dug them up with our fork to not damage the roots so we could transplant them in. We're gonna undersow some other crops for a lower crop, probably some lettuce, some bunching up lettuce, some tight heads of lettuce, and lots of little things popping up. We've got red tomatoes in here, and we've still got heirlooms. Where are they all at? I knew this. I saw a bunch of tomatoes earlier when I was looking. Got ourselves a whole bunch of habaneros and all of our 7-top turnips. We planted some Grand Rapids bunching lettuce in here. Starting to see some green sprouts come through, so the lettuce is popping up. All our Egyptian onions. We've got our potato sprouts coming through in several spots. So we've got a huge potato bed in here. We're going to plant up on the side of our tank. Lots and lots of perennial crops just kind of holding over till we plant them. Lots and lots of things planted in the greenhouse. Onions, potatoes. These are all elderberry cuttings, and we've got about a 99% success rate. Every one of them is rooted up and doesn't want to come out of the soil. So we've had a lot of failures, but we've had a lot of success along the way. So figuring everything out, sharing what we've learned, and continually growing this channel and growing our business, growing everything we've got. My children, my wife, everybody, we're always continually growing ourselves and growing our food. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching this video, staying tuned, and if anybody had any questions, I don't think I covered every single crop, but I tried to mention everything I possibly could to give you guys ideas of what you could possibly grow through the winter time. I'd really like to thank all the subscribers we've gotten recently. We've been very busy trying to get everything underway. We've been making a lot of financial movements this summer, and hopefully they all pay off as investments like we planned. I'd really like to thank you guys for tuning in, and until next time.